Hello and welcome everyone to today's cloud coaching session. My name is Karen Van Cleve and I'm a marketing event manager for the developer initiative here at Oracle. Today we're excited to show you how to configure Oracle REST Data Services 22.1 and demonstrate the service's functionality. If you do not currently have an Oracle Cloud account, we've got a special promotion with extra credits so that you can follow along with the demo today and try out OCI for yourself. To access the promo, please sign up using the same email that you registered with for the event. We'll also be recording the session, and the link to the recording will be sent to you via email in the next couple of days. If you have any questions during the webinar, we've set up a channel in our developer public Slack called Cloud Coaching North America that you can access at the QR code or at bit.ly/odevrel_Slack. Once you're in, you'll land in the general channel, and from there you can search for the webinar channel. We'll also be checking the Zoom chat and the Zoom Q&A areas throughout the webinar, and we'll open up for live Q&A after the demo. Today's webinar will be presented by Derek Cameron, Master Principal Cloud Architect, Becky Campelli, Staff Cloud Engineer, and Stephen Nichols, Master Principal Cloud Architect. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Derek.
Thank you, Tara. So I'm going to be covering just a very brief overview of Oracle REST Data Services. I'll touch bases a little bit on the installation configuration, but most of the time I'll spend in actually doing it. My motivation behind this is that the 22.1 changed a lot. If you kind of follow the ORDs install config blogs and that Jeff Smith, which is the product manager, did a really good presentation on that previously, but that was on a previous version. I think that the steps have changed. They've changed quite a bit, and they are a lot easier. So that's good news. And my hope is that you can actually go back through this recording and do it yourself. So let's go through just a little bit about the ORD service itself. So why would the database even care about it? Well, it seems just about every API these days supports REST. It's kind of ubiquitous based on HTTP, very simple to configure. You're going to see today, I'm going to actually install Apex. I'm going to set up ORDs to use Apex and to be the web server for Apex. I'm going to web enable a table in the database, and I'm going to set an endpoint as well on data in the database. So it's pretty easy to do. It also, ORDs has been evolving over the last few years, and it's supporting more and more. If you use Autonomous Database, for example, you'll see database actions. It's all a GUI in front on top of the database. That's all now part of ORDs. So if you haven't used ORDs before, definitely check it out. And since all your enterprise data is in an Oracle database, why not have it exposed through REST services? So what does it provide? It's a web listener for Oracle PL SQL programs or Apex. Previously, if you installed Apex, I've been with Oracle 26 years. I mean, we used to have the PL SQL Gateway and that. Now, ORDs is the method by which you're going to render your Apex pages. And so, get familiar with ORDs. It's going to allow you to expose data in your database. It's a web client for working with your Oracle database. And there's a management API. There's a whole management API on managing things like data pump, like that's now exposed. You can call it with basically a URL. It's an endpoint. And also SOTA support. If your example of emp here, accessing emp table in the database, you just submit a URL. You can even pass a filter parameter, in this case, environment's equal to 50. And then the payload that comes back is a JSON file. It automatically handles paging for you. It provides a link. You'll see down here a link for every single record. And it just manages the data types, things that you'd have to configure and set up is tedious, does it all automatically for you. Another example, this you recognize it is Apex. And so again, we're going to log into Apex when I'm done. But this just shows you how the ORDs is going to be the web listener, the web front end for the database and the Apex pages that are generated from the database. Here's another one where you'll notice it's ORDs and you'll say navigation is worksheet. It's like SQL Developer. You know, if you use SQL Developer like I have for really the past couple of decades, you're going to have a web front end for SQL Developer-like functions with the use of ORDs. So you don't necessarily need to deploy and install Java and install the SQL Developer client. You can use a web front end. So here's another example, data pump export. Really interesting. You can actually just issue a REST call in order to do things like data pump exports. And so what's supported? Well, everything from 11 R.2 and higher is supported. Of course, it's tied to really your database license. So it's, in a sense, it's free because you can just download. You can do a yum install. You'll see that later. I'm just going to do a yum install and super easy there. Classic architecture or multi-tenant. So if you've got a multi-tenant database, you can run it on a PDB. We don't recommend installing into a CDB. Recommend the install of Apex, for example, on a PDB, but it supports that architecture. And, you know, this has all been developed by the database team. And so I'm not going to go through all the different points here, but I'm just saying it came out really around 2011. And then every year we've really added a lot of new features, particularly in 2001. With the addition of database actions. Database actions is a whole set of functions that was added, and you'll recognize that if you use Autonomous Database, it's really the same graphical UI that ADB provides, only we expose it through ORDs. There's a data pump UI, chart content type, etc. You can explore that, but really, it's really evolved to the point where it's a pretty comprehensive set of services now. So how do you get started? Well, we're going to do that today. My steps are going to be to actually go through the installation and setup of ORDs and the installation of Apex. There's a lot of steps that I've already done to expedite the process. It doesn't take that long. If you were to go end to end, somewhere around half an hour, maybe 40 minutes, but I've done some of the steps in advance just to streamline the demo. But yeah, it is a major upgrade, 22.1. I'm actually running 22.2 right now. But if you had done it in the past, and I produced a recording of ORDs install config on a previous edition, and it was quite a few steps, and we had to actually edit these XML files. We needed to put the files in certain locations. We had to set paths and all that. It is quite a bit easier now. It's now comes with an executable. We didn't have an executable before. We executed a Java jar command line. Now it's prompted. It just says, what is your database connection? What is your host? What is your port? It just prompts you. And that's just a lot more user-friendly. Installation, Java command line or SQL Developer Wizard, silent or scriptable. I'll do it interactively. You don't have to have Apex, right? Just because often we install ORDs to support Apex. It's not dependent upon that. And it will run on different web servers, Tomcat, WebLogic server. I'm going to be doing this as on a standalone server. It comes with an embedded server. If you just want to play with it, it's just another, simplification for things like just, setting it up in a test environment. And it does support multiple connections. So you can have one ORDs installation, and when you'll see it when I go into the configuration, it's going to prompt, do you want to set up another database pool? Like, do you want to add one? And so it just creates different endpoints for every database and every schema and every table. So one ORDs installation can support multiple databases. So install ORDs, REST enable your schema, and then just publish your content. So I'm not going to actually do this, but if you want to run an end-to-end demo and basically reproduce everything that I'm doing, the first thing you do is go in and create a compute instance. Now, can this be on your desktop? Yes, it can. But if you're working with the cloud like we do every day, day in, day out, a lot of things that I used to do on my computer, I just do in the cloud. Spinning up a compute instance is really simple. I've got one running right now. And if you're going to reproduce this, I strongly encourage you to set up a notepad, because you're going to be copying things like the public IP address of the compute instance, right? You're going to start a compute instance, you're going to copy the address. So you're going to have a notepad with a bunch of information, and I'll point that out shortly. But to create an instance, I won't do that, but I'll just go through these steps. You're going to have a name. I typically go to availability zone 2 or 3, since 1 is the default and everybody creates it there. I tend to pick 2 or 3 to kind of reduce the number of images on number 1. And, just take the default. Oracle Linux 8 is fine. You don't have to change that. You've got a shape there. You can select the shape. Networking. You can actually create a new VCN. I've got an existing one. I would use that. It's in a different compartment. But if you create a new VCN, it'll prompt you to download the public and private keys, or just use an existing one that you've got. Subnet, same thing. I've got a VCN. I'm not going to create it right here, but go through and create a VCN, so you pick that here. And then let's go down here. SSH keys, generate a key, upload a key. I uploaded my own key. You can create one, have it create right for you. And then you just hit create, and it takes really very little time. It takes about 2 minutes to create. Again, I've done a few steps in advance. So let's go back up here. Let's go back, go to compute. We're going to go into database. So the second thing we need a database, right? And so the database on ADB really takes really not very long, maybe 2 or 3 minutes. But if it's a VM, if you're going to pick database VM, and remember, we wouldn't go in and create ORDs for Autonomous Database, because Autonomous Database already has exposed in a graphical UI all the things that we're doing in ORDs. That's already available. Apex is already available in ADB. The scenario and use case here is you've got an on-premise database, or you're running DBCS, and you want to run Apex, or you want to have database actions, and you want to REST enable your data in a DBCS or on-premise. That's why we would install ORDs, right? So I've got a database here. To create a database system, again, you just got the name. You pick a compartment, pick an availability zone, typically go with virtual machine. You got the shape here. You don't need four OCPUs. I'm not going to create it here. I notched that down back to 1 OCPU. If you're just playing with it, you don't need that much compute power. Scroll down, you've got a node. I've got a single node, SSH keys, generating a key, and then you've got license included. This, you have to pick one of these two, right? And then the networking, again, you would have to pre-create your network. I've got one. I've got it in a different compartment. You'd enter that. You've got to enter a host name prefix, and you don't need to enter a private IP address. When I'm just testing, I typically use a public subnet. Now, could I use a private subnet? Yes, you can, but then you would need a bastion host in order to connect to that. It's another public-facing compute node. It's just more steps. Of course, in a production environment or a sensitive environment, you would do that. I'm taking a very kind of open and permissive approach here just for the sake of streamlining the steps, but it's certainly easy enough to lock the whole thing down using private subnets. So, and then you'd walk through the wizards, and the only thing that's exposed and required on the next page is your administrator password. And again, that's one of the things you would put in your notepad. So let's go back here. And so under DBCS, there's a couple other things I want to point out. First of all, nodes. Go into nodes because nodes has got your database IP address. That's going to be your host. We're going to be using that. Copy that to your notepad. Go back to databases. Go to the other thing to do with DBCS, I'll show you here. I'm going to go into here and database connection. Click on database connection. There it is there, the connection string for the CDB, the container database. We're going to use that in order to connect. So close that. And the other thing is pluggable databases. I created a pluggable database. We're going to be installing Apex into the pluggable database, not into the container database. Go into P2P connection again. There's a quick, easy connect. Copy that, put it in your notepad. It's just another one of the things that we're going to be using as we work through this demo. So at that point, you've got a database running, you've got a compute node running. Pretty much all the rest of the steps are going to be done inside that compute, inside the compute node. And so I'm going to SSH into that. And I've got my keys here, my SSH keys. This is my desktop, right? You're looking at my desktop, but I need to go into compute and we're going to execute some install commands. And so let's do that. I'm going to SSH in. And this is really the beginning of the install and configuration of ORDs and the dependent pieces. And let's walk through that. And so these steps I've actually already done, but I'm going to show them because you're going to want to use those. So it's a yum install JDK. It's already installed. The next thing we're going to install is Instant Client. Paste, and you'll see if you compare this to all the previous steps, I mean, we had people downloading, unzipping. I'm just a huge fan of Yum. I mean, I run Enterprise Linux as my typical desktop. So, I mean, Yum commands are the easiest way to install software. I'm going to copy. The next one is installing SQL Plus. Again, I've already installed that. It's just a Yum install. And the last is ORDs. ORDs is a Yum install. So you got to love that. And so we're done with kind of the prereqs. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to sudo into Oracle. And we're going to download the Apex. And this is when you're going to really appreciate the use of the cloud. You'll be amazed. 120 megabytes per second. I download a couple of 100 megabytes in 2 seconds. I mean, who doesn't like that? I mean, otherwise you're on your desktop, you're downloading over the internet. This is incredibly fast. And then we're going to unzip Apex. So right click, copy. Let's unzip Apex. I've already done that, but it's very simple. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to say no. So unzip, it's just a basic unzip command. And now we're going to change directories to Apex. Remember, so we downloaded it, we unzipped it, it created an Apex directory, cd Apex, and we are going to connect to the sys user to install it. So here's where your connections come in. And I've got my password to enter. So I'm in as sys, and again, I'm going to issue this command to install Apex. It's just an Apex command. Let's just, actually, I don't have it here right now. So all you do is execute an ins APX. It's going to be in the documentation. I seem to have overwritten the command here. So after you've done that, you're going to exit out, and you're going to see the log file here. So let me just cap the log file after you issued the Apex installation. And this is what happens. It spills, and it takes about 4.5 minutes. It takes 4.5 minutes. If you look up here, you'll see all the different objects and all the steps that it takes. But it runs through, completes it, and you're pretty much done at that point. Now, one of the things I discovered when I was researching the installation steps is that it has additional configuration information. And so if I go to CD utilities and then support, you'll notice here there's an apex verify.sql. You're going to connect again, same connection, sys, connect as sys, connect, and then you're just going to say at apex verify.sql, and it generates this apex verify out. And so what does that look like? And so if I go back here, yeah, so this is the apex verify.html file. Now, be clear here, when you execute it on your compute node, it's there as a file, but you can't really view HTML. So you would have to SCP it down. That's what I've done. Just copy it down, just go into SCP and do a copy the command. And now I've got it in my browser. And in the browser, you'll see that you've got a lot of interesting diagnostic information here. It's got the database edition, where information about the schemas that are used to support it, all kinds of other things, packages, character sets. It's got, go down lower, DBA registry information, super interesting, Apex instance settings. I mean, it's just a wealth of information in here. So if you ever want to know more about your Apex installation, this SQL script that generates this HTML file is really helpful. So let me go back to my my terminal window. The steps are also documented. Steve put together a great how-to blog, and that's the steps that I'm following. So you should be able to recreate this yourself. So yeah, so there's the Apex verify. And let's go down here. And I just need to scroll down a little more on my steps, my cheat sheet. And we're going to go to post install. So I'm in the support directory now. And I'm going back up to my home directory and then into Apex because all the scripts are in there. And I'm going to log back into SQL Plus. I've got to enter my password. And this is another critical step. It is the creation of the Apex user ID and the setting of the password. So if I paste that, it's Apex change password. And by the way, if you ever lose your password for admin, which is pretty much you're locked out, you'll never get back in again, this script will do that. And so and by default, it's admin. You can pretty much skip or enter the Apex admin email address and then set the password. Let me do that. And so it's created the user, it's set the password, important step. And then you've got one more step here, alter profile default. Actually, that's not the right one. We have to unlock the Apex public user account. Let me go in here and do that. So that's unlocking the account. And I am going to briefly stop sharing because the next thing is alter user public Apex public user identified by, I'm going to stop sharing, enter that password. So we're back here. We set the password. And the next step is to Apex config, run the Apex REST config, copy at it wants a password for the listener. Just give me a second here. User. Okay, let me just execute that again. I've got some carriage returns that are getting picked up here. Password for Apex, sorry. There. That's better. And there's one other thing that is not going to be in the documentation, and we ran into that. It's password verification. And the issue there is that the password rules, for some reason, I created a password. I set it in SQL Plus, worked fine. Executing the password set within this script, for some reason, did not work, and turned out that the password verify rules were failing. I don't know why that would be, but I fixed it by turning off the password verify, and then you can reset it. Again, that's in Steve's steps, which we'll cover that. So we're going to exit out of SQL Plus here. And the next thing is that we're going to have to set the bash profile. And so that's setting the path to the ORDs executable. We're going to exit to OPC here. And now we're in OPC. We have to set the firewall. We have to open the firewall for the port that we'll be using. and it's by default 8080. And so we've done that. Now, bear in mind, on the VCN, you need to open that port as well. And I didn't cover that here, but when you create a VCN and you're accessing, you need to expose 8080 on the cloud virtual network, and you also need to open it up on the image here. So, so now let's log back into Oracle. We're almost there. We're logged back into Oracle, and we are going to kick off the last step before we can actually start looking at Apex. So this is the new executable I talked about. And you pretty much just take the defaults for the most part. Number 2, create or update a database pool and install upgrade ORDs. Okay. The next one is basic connection. Again, you can override these, but I'm taking this simple approach here. The database host name is that database IP. I need to copy that. That's my database IP. It's running on 1521. The database service, again, something that you would have copied to your notepad. Let me enter that. Administrator username is your sys user. This is your sys user. Database password. And now it's just prompting for table spaces. I'm going to take the default sysauth temp database actions. So you can do a subset of the functions. We're going to expose all of them. We're going to configure and start ORDs in standalone. Again, we're taking the simple install. We're going to use HTTP. We're going to use the default port 8080. And then the last thing that we need before we kick this thing off is the location of the Apex images. Whoops. It's there. Now, at this point, it's going to start ORDs. It's going to actually start. Don't close this window, because if you do, it's going to stop the server. Now, there's a command to start it again, no worries. But let's take a look and see if we bring up, we should be able to log into Apex. Copy. And I'm going to go back to my browser. I'm going to go to here, right click, paste and go. Now, this also takes a few seconds to start. So if you jump into here right away, you could find it not coming up. It's pretty quick. So Apex is installed. This is a fresh install. I'm going to go to internal, admin. Remember admin, the password. The password is the one we gave. And we are logging in. Should log in. There it is. So I've now configured ORDs for Apex, and I am good to go. Now, let's REST enable a table in ORDs. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that in SQL Developer. I created a user for that. Here, there's the ORDs test. And I created this table emp. So the first thing I'm going to do to expose this table, I right click and I go into, I right click on the service here. And properties, disconnect, connect. So we'll just reconnect to the ORDs test system. Now you'll notice REST services. Remember, so I'd connected before REST was before ORDs was installed and configured, and it wasn't even available options. So now that I've installed it, enable REST service. Be sure to check enable schema. You probably should have security on it, but if you're just testing like me, you just say next. And if you want the SQL, you can say, well, Derek, I don't have SQL Developer installed. You can literally just use this here and you've got the information. I can issue this in SQL Plus. Finish. Okay. And if I got a table here, I'm going to expose that. Right click, enable REST service, enable object, next, finish. Again, you can pick up the SQL on that. Now let's go back to and test that endpoint. Copy, right click, paste and go. There it is there. It's the JSON payload, just as I explained previously. And then the last thing we're going to do is create a RESTful service through the connections navigator. We're going to actually expose a module. We're going to be more granular. And so let's go to here, and we're going to go there, and we're going to go to REST data services module. We're going to do a new module. The module name is, we're going to call it demo module. The prefix is /demo module / next. And the URI pattern, we're going to go emp / next. Again, you've got the SQL for this, right? Okay. When we open up the module, right, we got to add a handler. And we're going to use a get. And it's a collection query. There, and then select star from M. We're going to save that. And then the last thing we're going to do is edit that. We're going to publish that, apply. And now let's go back to my URL and let's test that. Paste and go. And there it is there. And so at that point, we're pretty much done with what I wanted to present. What I've done is created a compute instance, created a database. I installed ORDs and a few other things into the compute instance. I installed Apex. From the compute instance, I downloaded Apex, I installed it. It was now in the database installed. I executed some configure scripts. And then the final thing was to actually set up a database pool for the listener. And then I went in, I logged into Apex, and then I exposed a table as a REST endpoint. And then I created a module and set up access to data in that table, again, through a module. We'll do one final test. We'll bring up SQL Developer through ORDs. The URL is simply the IP address port 8080. The ORDs and SQL Developer, you'll see here, my username is ORDs test. And we'll bring up the password and sign in. And this will give you a whole web front end to your database. You've got the SQL, the data modeler, Liquibase, REST, charts, scheduling, et cetera. Very similar to Autonomous Database. Autonomous Database has a number of other things like machine learning, but for your on-premise database, this is a whole new way in which you can access your data and manage your data. If you just want to go in and do things that you would normally do with SQL Developer Client, you just simply select the SQL workshop there and drag a table over. I just want to select the data from it, apply, and execute that. And you'll see the data. So hopefully this is you found this useful. It's just much simpler now to install and configure ORDs than it ever used to be. And it provides a lot more functionality. I guess at that point, I'll turn it over to you, Becky, for the Code Innovate bit.
Sounds good. Thank you, Derek, for an excellent presentation. So for a couple of minutes here before we take some question and answer, I just want to introduce to you the Code Innovate program here at Oracle. I am a cloud engineer in analytics mainly, and I work with the Code Innovate team on emerging technologies and developer relations. And I think it's a great partnership here with the developer relations team. If you've been around for a couple of weeks, at least, you might have seen this program before, but for anybody who's missed it in the past, we just want to spread awareness about what we do. So as an introduction, an illustration. These two kids like to go to Legoland each year. And whenever they go to Legoland, they like to participate in what's called a Master Builder class. And at the beginning of a class, each kid sits down and receives a bag of disassembled Lego pieces, as you can see there. And over the course of about an hour, the kids get to follow along with what the Master Builder is doing to learn new techniques and patterns for how to put together new projects in Legos. So as you can see here, these kids have learned a new brick interlocking pattern and created these penguins with earmuffs. At its core, Virtual Code Innovate is very similar. For 5 half days together, our engineers will jump into cloud services with yours and work online together and get hands-on in your use cases. And this is really a great way to knowledge share and jumpstart any development that you are looking to do in the cloud. At the end of an event, there's an opportunity to showcase your solutions to any executive sponsors. So if you have a cloud project that you're looking to, maybe get some leadership on board with, or just to test something out to see how it works and will work for your organization, Code Innovate is a perfect example for how to bring that to fruition. How does Code Innovate work? We'd love for you to bring your use cases versus working on, pre-built content or standard demos. We really want to dig into your very own use cases. And during the Code Innovate event for 4 hours each day, we'll share knowledge and bring our expertise to bear on whatever use case that you brought to the table. And during that time, we aim to build a first pass prototype on the use cases that you've brought. So what can a use case consist of? It can consist of many things, not limited to this list here, but we've done a lot of different types of events, from analytics focus, you could see, to more developer related, OCI infrastructure type use cases, to data integration from apps or data source to data source. And then we've got a lot of end user based type solutions as well, like chatbots and low code applications, which perhaps all you are familiar with Apex, and content management and things like that. So we would love to collaborate with you. If you have any project along these lines or otherwise in Oracle Cloud, just hit us up. We have an email address that universally you can use to contact us. And in addition, we can take your email email addresses if you're interested on the spot today, and we'll contact you very soon to get in touch about doing an event together.
So with that, I'd like to say thanks again, Derek, Stephen, Becky, and thank you all for spending your time here with us today. We hope you have a great rest of your day and that we get to see you again next time.